You're listening to the IO Soapbox with Aiken. I'm an IO psychologist, which of course means no one knows what I do. Now on this show, we are going to talk about IO psychology. I'm hoping that some of you not in IO will want to join us, and those of you in IO will be inspired to break new ground. Now, let's get me a cup of coffee, because I'm tired, and then it's time for me to rant about random things on my soapbox.
Okay, so on last week's episode, we talked about what you might look for in a master's program if you want to go on and get a master's in IO psychology. So we talked about things like, do you want to do a thesis or not? You know, with a thesis preparing you perhaps to go into a PhD program. We talked about, daytime, nighttime programs. Do you want a program that will get you ready for applied IO work and let you get out into the field? So maybe something like a practicum or internship. So hopefully you spent a little bit of time thinking through the kind of program that you would want to be a part of, that you would want to get your master's degree from. So the next step is, once you've actually looked through programs, go onto the SciOp website. So SciOp actually has a great listing of graduate programs. You can search for master's programs and then do your research on those programs based on what you're interested in, thesis, fieldwork, things like that. Spends time on their websites. Once you've created a list of the master's programs that you are interested in applying to, the next thing that you want to do is figure out why they should want you, right? So you've already gone through their information and you've decided what programs you're attracted to. Now you've got to sell those programs on you. So when you do that, what you really want to be doing is thinking about your narrative. So, for me, obviously, as an enormous nerd, my narrative might be the structure of scientific revolutions. Your narrative is really about who you are, what you're looking for, and essentially why who you are makes you an excellent fit for those master's programs that you're looking for. The first part of your narrative is figuring out what your story actually is and building your story. That the idea of a narrative really implies something that is unfolding over time. It's not just a snapshot. It is your personal story, even as early as from your young childhood all the way to where you are now, and in fact to where you are in a year or two, depending upon how far out you are from applying. By the way, it is never too early or too late to start thinking about your narrative. So let's talk a little bit about what you would want to do in terms of getting the right experiences and what kinds of experiences might be useful for putting your personal narrative together. So first of all, thinking about your experiences, one way to think about them is to kind of think about what you would put together on your resume. Because your resume, of course, is a kind of professional narrative, if you will. It says where you've been, what you've done, who you are from a more academic or practical sense. So the first thing to do when you're thinking about your resume, about your narrative, is to look at your building blocks. What experiences have you had so far? What things have you done? What courses have you taken? What research experience do you have? What jobs have you had? What internships have you had? All that information. And even just, you can list them out, I'm kind of pulling out these blocks and look at it, and kind of get a sense of your story to date, what you've actually accomplished, what you've done. And then when you're putting that resume together for real, in preparation to apply for a program, what you want to do is retain the pieces of your story and your narrative that will make you attractive to that school. So let's say in my narrative, I have a little bit of research experience. And I have some applied experience, right? I have some practical experience in the field, and maybe some courses in IO psychology. When I'm putting my resume together, if I'm applying for a program that is research-oriented, that has a thesis at the end of it, that's really focused on developing those academic research skills, I want to make sure that my resume is focusing on the components of my narrative that are all about research. And obviously I'm going to have my coursework in here too, but there are going to be pieces of my experience, some of the applied work, that don't fit into that narrative. The narrative that I'm telling to that master's program is the narrative of me as a researcher and my desire to become trained as a researcher in IO psychology. So the parts of my story that pertain to research and to education in IO psychology are going to be the most powerful. Now, if I'm applying to programs that prize that applied experience, that I'm really looking for application, then I'm going to pull the pieces of my experience. Obviously, again, we're going to stick with the academic component, the courses that I've taken in IO psychology. I'm going to put together the pieces of my experience that highlight my practical and applied experience. The research components may still be in there, but they might be less important, right? If the program is oriented around creating a practitioner, I need to communicate to that program that I want to be a practitioner. When a program is choosing applicants, who it's going to let in, what they're looking for is somebody who's going to stay in their program, who's going to complete the program, who is going to be happy with the results, who's going to benefit. Master's programs are not out here looking to take advantage of people. They're out here looking to give people the education that they want, that they can provide, the program can provide. So for example, my program is an applied program, the MPS here at the University of Maryland, and if I have an applicant whose entire story is research-based, one of the things that they're going to need to do in their narrative is tell me a little bit about why their research experiences have convinced them that they want to go applied. Because my program is applied. If someone comes in and says, I have research experience and all I ever want to do is research, but that's not what I'm training you to do. I'm training you to be an applied practitioner in IO. Now, obviously, you can have research experience and decide that that's not for you. You want to be in an applied field. That's great, good. Just spell that out in your personal statement. Anytime that your story, your background, does not match with what the programs that you were interested in seem to be looking for, that's something that you're going to want to explain in your personal statement, right? It's basically anytime you're telling a story, it's like a plot hole, right? Anytime you're telling a story and there's a plot hole, there's something that doesn't quite make sense, you got to close the hole. You got to do something in your statement of purpose to close out that narrative and help it make sense to whomever is reading your application. When you're applying to these master's programs, you are going to want to customize your application for each program, because each program is going to look for a different kind of person and highlight different pieces of work. You're also going to want to think about how you are making who you are clear to the program and clear to the admissions committee. You know who you are. You know how excited you are about this. But as somebody who's reading your application, all I have is the material in your application. That's all I know about you. So that is your chance to tell your story, your narrative, and tell us a little bit about why this program, whatever program you're looking at, like why are you going to a research-oriented program? What experiences and interests do you have? Why are you going to an applied-oriented program? What experiences do you have? Where you see gaps, you're going to be explaining them in your statement of purpose. And if you still have time, you're also going to want to try to get those experiences. For applied-oriented programs, some of those experiences are going to be possibly internships or coursework. For research-oriented programs, try to get some coursework or more research experience, right? So you can also sculpt your narrative in advance and take the kind of opportunities that you can that will make you even more attractive to the programs that you're interested in. And a final word of caution. For both master's and PhD programs, and we will talk about PhD programs in the future, you do want to look at your GPA. And for some programs, you do want to think about your GRE score. Now, we're going to go ahead and table the GRE discussion for now, because I'm going to go ahead and go all in and rant about the GREs in a couple of episodes, because, I have some feelings. About the GREs, but also we'll talk a little bit about how you can prepare yourself best for them if you have to go through that nonsense. As for GPA, one of the things that I hate to say is, do be mindful of your GPA if you can from an early stage in your education. A lot of master's programs will look at your GPA. A lot of PhD programs will look at your GPA. So obviously your higher GPAs are very helpful. You are going to want to strike a balance between learning and getting the grades you need to get into graduate school, and that is a painful and really difficult thing to say. That being said, a lot of programs will say that they cannot accept people with under 3.0 GPAs. That is both true and not true. So be sure to look into the policies of the graduate programs that you are interested in. For example, at the University of Maryland, the formal policy is that we cannot accept people with GPAs under 3.0. We actually can, as long as the program director writes a letter about why we think that person can still be effective despite not having a 3.0 GPA. So if you have a 3.0 GPA or below, your statement of purpose is a place to help us understand why that GPA is not indicative of who you are in terms of your capacity to perform highly. So, you have some people who go through intense personal tragedies during undergraduate, or they're working multiple jobs while trying to put themselves through school, or they have significant health scares. There are lots of different reasons that somebody's GPA might be lower, even if they're working hard in their classes, they care, and they're really, strong academically. So your statement of purpose becomes an opportunity to explain that particular discrepancy. Additionally, if you have a GPA below 3.0, but you've been out working for 5 years and you've been holding down jobs that are relevant to the field that you're interested in, your IO psychology, that's another good indicator that you have the capacity to be extremely effective and that your GPA is probably not indicative of your true capabilities. We also tell people with lower GPAs, if you take additional undergraduate courses, or sometimes if you already have another graduate degree, that also counts as, indication that you are capable of performing at a very high level. Because really the GPA is just a fuzzy indicator of your possible capacity, right, in graduate education. It's not the best indicator of all time. It's just a fuzzy indicator. So anything that tells us that a low GPA is nothing to be worried about is something that you can include in your narrative as something for the admissions committee to consider. So even if your GPA is lower, don't completely despair. Check out those programs that you're interested in, learn more about their policies and how they handle low GPAs, and then again, think about what that means in terms of your narrative and what building blocks you need to demonstrate to these people, to those admissions committees, that you are the person that they are looking for, that you are going to fit in with their program and that you are going to be awesome with their program. So those are just some of the things to consider as you're starting to get ready to apply for a master's program in IO psychology. And again, this is building off of last week's when we kind of talked about the different types of master's programs you might look at, like the different components. So this is more about, how do you prepare yourself? How do you put together your story? We will do a little bit of conversation, a little bit of one-sided conversation, a little bit of me listening to myself talk for 30 minutes, an hour,